There was this arcade I used to go to a lot when I was younger in a nearby mall. The area of the mall where this arcade used to be is now just another basic clothing store or something. I don't even know, but I just know it's not the arcade anymore. They got rid of it a little while after this incident from my junior year of high school. The arcade would attract a lot of high school age kids at night, usually to just hang out or play the games in there or mess around. I was with my three friends, Luke, Carter, and Chris. Only Chris and I were really there to play the games. Luke and Carter were more just along for the ride. They were horsing around per usual, but they could get overly obnoxious, often utterly embarrassing. At least Carter could be. Chris joined in with them too, leaving me to play the games alone. But that was fine. I was always more into the games anyway. They got bored quickly. They said they were going to go walk around the mall for a bit, so I continued playing. After a little while longer, the workers started cleaning up, getting ready to close. I believe it was between 8 and 9 when they started cleaning the arcade and shutting down some of the games. Chris and I realized we'd head out soon too, but I wanted to play a few more times. Sometime later, the workers started really trying to usher us and some other leftover kids out. I texted Luke and Carter to come back. By the time Chris and I were exiting the arcade, there were only a couple lingering kids left inside. The mall was starting to quiet down. Chris and I waited by the front entrance of the arcade for Luke and Carter to return. I started texting a bunch of nonsense and typing in all caps, saying, "Hurry up, come on, guy." Doesn't read his texts. You know, this Chris said, I wanted to just leave. Eventually, Carter texted back with, "We're coming." A stream of messages followed that almost made me throw my phone at the wall, and I distinctly remember Carter asking, "Where in the mall are we?" Quote, "Why would Chris and I leave the arcade just for you guys to come back?" Eventually, we got sick of waiting, so we started walking ahead towards my car at the time. My car was a big old early 2000s Suburban that my parents got for cheap. I had my license at the time, but honestly, I didn't even mind driving such a huge piece of crap around. At first I did, then I owned it. It was parked a good distance from the entrance, about 3 rows of cars from the entrance actually. Chris and I waited by the car for Luke and Carter. Now the wait was even more annoying. We didn't have any more money to go spend inside the mall, and we were bored. Chris opened one of the back doors of my car and then suddenly said to me, "Get in." I asked why. He pointed inside the car. He saw two dudes sitting in the far back seat of my car wearing masks. My initial reaction was that it was Luke and Carter, but then I realized neither of them were that tall. As I got on the phone with the two in my car, instead of getting in and confronting the people in the car, my adrenaline kicked in, and instead I grabbed whatever random crap I had in my backpack and I threw it at the dude sitting in the back. At the same time, I was yelling for them to get out, that the car was mine. They didn't say a word and quickly took off in their escape, and as they fled, I saw a third guy who was on the front floor seat of the passenger side pop up and run too. It may have been dumb to alert them like that, but seeing that they were plotting something in silence while wearing masks, I felt their chances of having weapons was very high. I didn't know what else to do other than to let them go without hurting us. We jumped down, and I just drove straight off. Weirdly enough, Carter texted me we never told them what just happened. I drove all the way home, and after going to my room while texting Carter back, I realized that Luke's phone might be dead or something, so I tried calling Carter. It rang like 2 times and then went to voicemail, indicating his phone was manually hung up. My adrenaline was starting to rush again, knowing something was wrong. I tried to call 2 more times, but his phone was off. I then texted Luke saying to turn on his phone and what's going on. Why did Carter turn his phone off? There was then a knock at my bedroom window to the backyard, and hearing that almost gave me a heart attack. Hearing unexpected tapping at my window at night is not something I would ever want. For the second time that night, my first instinct would be that it was Luke and Carter, but why would they be here instead of in the mall? After that, I was getting more texts from Carter, which was weird as hell, because I would have seen them coming from the backyard to my room, unless they went through the back door without my noticing. The next time they tapped on the grass to the left of my window, ignorance is bliss the screws. I was too afraid to look out my window, though I really wanted to. I didn't know what was waiting for me there. Chris and I texted each other our shared fear over what just happened and what we should do now, but we eventually agreed to just wait for things to pass and for Luke and Carter to show up the next day, only they didn't. The next day, I found out through teachers that Luke and Carter were out sick. I walked to Luke's house that day after school. It's only a block away from Norm. Anyway, Luke's mom answered the cord, and she said Luke was upstairs in this room. I walked up and knocked on the door that I'd knocked on many times before. After Luke finally answered, barely peeking the door open, Carter was in the room too. The first thing I asked was, "Why didn't you come to school?" His response was that he was sick. I asked Carter the same question, and his answer was the same. I was still picking up bad vibes that didn't add, and then started asking, "Why would you ask us where we were in the mall after we were planning on meeting up at the arcade again?" The two of them just looked at each other and shrugged their shoulders. I changed the question to what happened to Carter's phone. "How did you guys get to my house last night?" Those were the last two questions I asked. The door was slammed shut in my face, and I left the house. I'm starting to think they got into some trouble at the mall, and that's why they disappeared for a while. I also think they tipped off those guys about my car and led them in, or at least eluded them to my car to rob it or something. I don't really know why they did what they did that night, but what I do know is that that was the end of Carter, and I, remaining friends, Luke and I drifted apart as well. If you enjoy our stories, show some love with a subscribe and a like. It encourages us to make more. Back in high school, I often stayed at my friend Will's house on weekends. Will didn't have a very good home life. His parents fought a lot, and his house was very small, so I didn't like going over there. He was a cool guy, and we both worked together at a local family arcade and fun center. It was mostly for kids, but had a lot of things to do, and both Will and I enjoyed working there. We also would go there on weekends and stay late for quite some time while it was open. On weeknights, it would close at about 10 or p.m., but on weekends, we would be there until about 1 or 2 in the morning sometimes. We would pick up extra hours and clean and organize things after it closed. When I would spend the night at Will's house, we would hang out until late, and then we would go out for a ride or sometimes hang out at the arcade. He lived just outside of town, so there wasn't a whole lot of stuff to do at his house. I remember this one late fall night, there had been a storm. We were hanging out in the arcade and noticed this car outside in the parking lot. It was parked the opposite way and still had its headlights on. The car was not there when we had left, so we now knew that they had pulled up sometime when we were gone. I didn't say anything about it, and I didn't know if Will noticed or not. We went inside and hung out, then played some games and got something to eat. Then I told Will I was going to the bathroom. When I came out, I heard noise from the front arcade area, and Will wasn't around. I figured he had gone to the parking lot or something, but then I heard voices. I walked across to the front area of the arcade, and standing in the middle was Will and some other guy. He was a man who looked to be in his 40s or 50s, and I don't think I had seen him before. The guy pretty much just stood there, and Will waved me over. When I got there, he said that the man wanted to know if we had any cigarettes because he was out. We both said no because neither of us smoked. After that, the guy just left, and it seemed really weird. I wanted to ask Will about what the story was with that guy, but he didn't seem to want to talk about it, so I didn't say anything to him. We then locked up and left about an hour later. Both of us were really tired and went to bed when we got back to his house. The next day, I got home and was about to head to bed that night when my phone rang. I answered, and it was Will. He said that he was going to have a late night at the fun center and asked if I wanted to come back over. I declined because I was really tired, and he understood. For some reason, I asked him if he had given a cigarette to that guy if he ever came back. I didn't really know why I asked him because I was sleepy, and I thought it was kind of dumb after I did. Will said no, of course, because he didn't smoke, and I already knew that. We then both said goodbye and went to bed. That night, I was up in the middle of the night for some reason. I looked at my clock and it was about 3:30 in the morning. I wondered what Will was doing and if he was at the fun center. I wasn't too tired, and so after about 10 minutes or so, I decided I would call him. I picked up the phone and made the call. It ended up going to voicemail after ringing for about 30 seconds. That was kind of strange because I know Will wouldn't be asleep at this time, especially not after he called me over an hour later. I then went back to sleep and ended up not waking up until nearly noon the next day. When I was awake, my mother told me that Will's mom had called for me. She didn't say what it was about, but told me to call her back when I had the chance. I figured it was something about Will, so I gave Will a call when I had the chance. His phone went to voicemail once again, and that was when I was really getting a bad feeling. I then dialed his mom's number, hoping that it wasn't something bad. When his mom answered, she told me that Will had not come home last night. He was supposed to, but didn't, and she wanted to know what happened. I told her I would try to figure it out. I then drove down to the fun center. It wasn't open because it was a weekday. I went around the entire thing, but didn't find any clues or anything. Then I drove a few more places that I thought Will might be at. I couldn't find him, and I really had no clue where he was. At some point, I figured that we should go to the police. I sort of wanted to wait a day, but the more I thought about it, Will's mom would probably want to go now. I drove back to his house. A police officer was there when I pulled in, and his mom was outside talking to him. I got out and walked over there, and she introduced me to him. His name was Officer Loomis, and they were both happy that I was here. Then I gave the officer all the details of the last time I had seen Will and when. Will had last been seen in the fun center that day early in the morning. Later in the day, Officer Loomis met me at the fun center, and we searched the place together. It was all locked like I left it, and there was no sign of foul play or anything else that appeared strange. After some time, the guy really didn't have any answer. He then asked me if anyone else had come there and met up with us when we were there. That was when I remembered that strange guy who had come in asking for cigarettes. Somehow, I had completely forgotten about him, but now I remembered. I told the officer, and together we went to the security cameras and watched what footage there was. I know we would be able to find that guy, and I was worried that maybe he had something to do with Will's disappearance. The only reason why I hadn't brought him up sooner to the cop was because I really did forget. I guess I wasn't in investigator mode, and I had stopped thinking about him soon after he had left. We discovered the time when the guy walked into the fun center on a security camera. We didn't have one on the outside though, so we couldn't see where he came from or where he went after he left. It wasn't much, but the officer said that it was something to go off of. I will be asking around if anyone knew the guy. Several hours later, we had a name. The guy was considered a drifter, and he had already been in trouble a few times with the police for various things. The officer was able to track down where he was staying at, and they went to go question him. The good news was Will was there, and he was all right. I never could have anticipated that he would be found at the drifter guy's house. As it turned out, the guy knew about Will's home life and had given him some items in exchange for Will helping him out with some things. Ever since then, whenever I would stay over, Will would help the guy out with whatever he needed. The guy had paid him soundly for it, so I guess Will got a pretty good deal out of it. Luckily, nothing bad had happened to Will at all. In high school, I used to love going to the arcade because the amount of fun you could have for $10 was a lot more than you could get anywhere else. When you ran out of coins, you could run around and play some of the games that you could play for free, like air hockey or the few other things in the back. There was one arcade that I liked above all the others. I usually went there by myself because it was behind a store, and not a whole lot of people knew about it, and also not a whole lot of my friends liked going to the arcade either. I'm not sure why, but they never seemed to be busy. It was called Willie's Circus. One day, I decided to take my younger brother there. He was 14 at the time and had been there before, but not in a while. It was a weekend, so there were a few other kids there, and I mostly just went around doing my own thing while not really paying attention to my brother. I was 18, and I spent about a half an hour there playing various games. Then I decided to get something to eat and leave my brother. I had given him several dollars worth of coins beforehand. I walked to a nearby store and ate. It took me a little while because the lines were long and I was obviously in no hurry to get back. Like I said, my brother was 14, so he was capable of being on his own, and it wasn't like my parents asked me to take him out. I did this on my own, so I didn't feel like I always had to be with him. After I finished, I walked back to the arcade. I saw my brother sitting in one of those gaming chairs playing Call of Duty with one of the newer big screens. I went up to him, and he was playing against some other guy who looked like he was in his 20s. I watched them finish the round, and the guy beat my brother probably due to the fact that he was so much older. My brother seemed really upset by it and got out of the chair when it was over, and he went on to the next game. I asked him what was wrong. He said the guy was being a big jerk and was saying not nice things to him while playing. I asked what he was saying, but my brother just walked away. I turned and saw the guy still sitting there in the chairs. He was looking at me, and I looked away and then went with my brother. We didn't talk about it after that, and I let him play a few more games. We stayed for about a half an hour longer. Then we decided to leave, and I noticed that kids closed. I overheard one of the workers say that some games were going to be gone soon to make room for new ones. I was glad the place was getting at least some business. I thought it was a shame that there weren't more people that used the arcade. On the walk home, my brother told me that he saw the guy who beat him as we were leaving. I didn't notice him, but I didn't really look hard for him either. When we got home, he told me that somebody had sent him a friend request on the game that they were playing online. I asked if it was the guy that he had played against in the arcade earlier. He said it wasn't, but then said it was a different username. I told him he should message the person and ask them who it was. He agreed with me and did pretty much right after getting the friend request. About an hour later, the guy responded saying that he had played with him at the arcade earlier. We felt it was kind of strange that he would send him a friend request if he was nothing but a jerk to him the whole time. Also, how he changed his username. Then, my brother told me that the guy had sent him a private message afterwards, basically making fun of him and telling him how bad he was at playing. A couple of days went by, and my brother said that he wasn't going to respond to him. The guy also sent several more messages to him. We agreed that we were not going back to that arcade. Then it was a Saturday night. Our parents were out of town, and we were just hanging around the house playing video games mostly. At about 7 p.m., there was a knock on our door. We both went to see who it was, and I answered the door. Standing on our front porch was the guy from the arcade. It was really creepy because I immediately recognized him. He seemed to look similar but different. He also smelled like he had been drinking quite a bit. I asked him what he wanted. He asked if we wanted to go play video games in the arcade with him. I got a really weird feeling. Then I asked him, "How did you know where we live?" He didn't respond. He then asked, "Are you the kid that I played at the arcade butchering my brother's name when he mentioned it?" I said no. Then I walked inside and shut the door, locking it. The guy then rang the doorbell, but we ignored it. After that, we watched some TV in the living room and didn't hear from the guy anymore. I really wanted to know how he had found our house, though. I guessed that he had maybe looked up my brother's name and found our address. My brother's username was also his first and last name with no spaces. I told him that maybe that wasn't the best idea for his username because of people like this. The next morning when I woke up, I discovered that our house had been broken into. The back door window was shattered. It was pretty clear that some of our things were stolen, including my PS4 and a few other things missing from the basement. I knew it had to be the guy from the night before, but how could I find him? I knew what I would do. I told my brother to message him saying that he would like to play some more video games with him. It was a long shot, but we did it. Much to our surprise, he responded saying that he would love to. Then I got on my brother's game console and continued to message him, pretending to be my brother. I asked him when, and he said he could play later that same day. I asked him if he couldn't make it to the arcade, then asked for his address. He actually gave it to me. I then called the police and told them of the break-in and gave them the address. They went there, and he actually lived there. They found some of my stuff. I could not believe that we actually got our stuff back. The whole thing seemed so unreal, and I guess the guy was just really stupid. After that, I changed my younger brother's username just to be on the safe side. I learned a lot from this whole thing. When I was 12 years old, I would always go to this arcade in my town called the Theater Arcade. Even though there wasn't actually a movie theater anywhere in sight, nor was there a single movie-themed game inside. I would be dropped off sometimes with my friend Kevin, while our parents would be at work. This was back in the late 80s, so times were different. My family was pretty well off at the time. We collected a lot of arcade and pinball machines in our basement, but we didn't have certain ones, obviously. When my family built the basement, the main focus was alcohol and bar, not entertainment. I would say we had maybe 5 arcade machines down there, but there were so many more still out there. Kevin and I would go up to Roy and ask for money to play the games. Usually he would. We had to go on days Roy was there, because the other guy who worked mornings, Tom, pretty much never gave out free coins to the arcade machines to us kids. The arcade had to officially close at 9, but Roy would always let us kids stay in for an extra hour or more, because after 9, the 18-plus guys would come in and play some games in the back table behind the machines and counter. It wasn't anything bad, it was just gambling with the arcade games. There was some way they would manage to get coins out of the machines to use for winning money, and then Roy would have to crack down on some of the machines to basically empty it out to put the money in his safe. Why he did all this, I don't know. If he had to do it every night, I don't know. Part of me thinks he just likes to hang out with all the guys who came. I'm just mentioning this because it plays a role in the one night I have never ever forgotten. One Friday, I got into a stupid fight with Kevin over God knows what. I still wanted to go to the arcade though. I planned on asking Roy to just get a ride home from some of his friends later on. My mother dropped me off on the side of the building like she always did though. I could have swore I told my mom Kevin was going to hang out, but now I'm certain I didn't. That kid Tom was working, unfortunately. I did my usual of asking him for some change, but he really was a cheap ass. After an hour or two, the day was starting to turn to night, and Tom told me I had to go. I asked why he said he never lets us kids stay when the other guys come, yet Roy lets us stay. He didn't answer. He was buzzed, no question about it. Roy never drank like that, or at least never at the arcade. Tom was a bit of an alcoholic on the job. He was slurring his words since I got there. When I asked him if I could use the bathroom before I left, he said I could really quickly. For the most part, the guys who came to these little illegal casino-like nights inside the arcade were cool. Problem was, I was a kid, and I definitely came off as annoying to a lot of them. One time, I was playing on the machine they were using for their bets, and Roy had to ask me to just watch for a little bit, because I guess some of the guys were getting impatient. I really had no healthy fears at my young age. I don't know what was up with me. Like I said, back then was just such a different time. I finished up in the bathroom. The bathroom had no real door. It just had a curtain on one of those circular curtain rods. I actually hung out in the bathroom on the top of the toilet for as long as I could bear the smell of the cigarettes just sinking into my clothing, ultimately making me have to leave. Tom asked once again how come I was still here and told me to get out. I didn't want to push his buttons anymore, so I actually put on my jacket and went out to wait in my mom's car. Except my mom wouldn't be back for like another hour. I didn't know that until afterwards though, since it turns out she was at some kind of company gathering at the time. I'd say minutes after I walked outside, the man I was afraid of. However, it was a familiar man. He'd been at the place a few times before actually, and he never gave off creepy vibes. He saw me in the parking lot before he entered the building, and he came over. He asked me why I was sitting in the parking lot, so I told him the honest truth, that Tom kicked me out, and my mom wasn't going to be back for like an hour. I didn't say she didn't actually know I was sitting by the arcade, however. He said he'd speak with Tom. I felt like I made a mistake after saying it, because I didn't feel like it was actually necessary that he got involved in any way. But he turned and went inside, and literally not 10 seconds later, he turned and walked back out, and simply gestured for me to come inside, so I did. When I went inside, he pointed at Tom, who looked very pissed off by now, and said something to Tom that made me laugh to myself. He basically called him an obnoxious drunk. After Tom grunted a few times, the guy led me to the back of the arcade where he and Roy and some other pretty well-known to me faces were all hanging out, playing games. Roy handed me a $10 roll of coins for the arcade machines, and I thought Roy had this planned out ever since I entered to go use the bathroom, because he knew Tom was going to kick me out, and then the man was going to get me and bring me inside. I know it seems really dumb of me to think this looking back now, because it doesn't even sound possible given the time between everything. Maybe I was just looking for a reason for something that made no sense to me at the time. Roy seemed pissed when he saw me, actually. Now looking back, I'm not sure that guy was even invited to play with them that night. Whenever I think back to that night, I come to realizations like that one. Whatever the case was, the guy and a few other guys left in a clunky, old, I think, Buick later that night when I was leaving. I'd say 4 of the guys were still there. My mom was an hour late, and when she finally did get there, I told her that Tom guy kicked me out again. I told my mom all the rest of the stuff that happened with that one guy, and Mom told me she didn't know all that. My mom told my dad, and I think my dad handled it because that Tom guy was never back at the arcade again. I still wonder how my dad got him to quit, if he actually had any authority to do so. In fact, I'm not even sure if we were ever welcome back there with Roy again. I don't remember anything after that night at the arcade. It's still strange, and I don't know if that one man was bad-intentioned or if he was genuinely concerned for my safety.